Welcome back to Sheikh El-Sahrawy's Reflections on the Holy Quran. In this series, we delve into the profound insights of the late Sheikh Muhammad Metwali El-Sahrawy as he unpacks the meanings of God's words. Today, we're turning our attention to the very beginning of humanity's story in the Quran, specifically Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 30 to 34. Miriam, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Yusuf. It's always a privilege to explore these verses and Sheikh El-Sahrawy's beautiful way of explaining them. These verses introduce us to the creation of Adam alayhi salam and the dialogue surrounding it.
Exactly. The text begins by setting the scene. After God tells us he created everything in the universe, he wanted to tell us about those he created to populate it. And so, the very first story God chose to begin the stories of the Quran with is the story of Adam alayhi salam, the first man. Sheikh El-Sahrawy emphasizes that this story is mentioned multiple times in the Quran, not just for narrative, but to guide us to the reason God wanted us to know it, and crucially, to show us the truth of God's message. As it says in Surah Al-Kahf, verse 13, God relates their story with truth.
That word truly is so significant, isn't it? Sheikh El-Sahrawy points out that it indicates there are some stories which are not true. The kind people exchange, historical accounts that might not reflect facts, or baseless legends. God distinguishes his stories from these.
And he connects this to the very Arabic word for story, qissa, which comes from the verb meaning to follow someone's tracks, like following tracks in the desert sand to find what you're looking for at the end. Since God tells true stories, it follows that all stories in the noble Quran are true events that actually happened.
And each one isn't just a historical anecdote, it imparts a lesson. Something important God wants to alert us to. One of the key purposes Sheikh El-Sahrawy mentions is strengthening the resolve of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the believers. God tells his messenger that all he relates of the accounts of the messengers is to reinforce his heart, as in Surah Hud, verse 20.
So they fortify hearts during times of worry. These stories aren't just there to kill time. Their lofty goal is to strengthen and benefit the motions of the spiritual life.
They discuss historical events, linking them to the times they occurred, or focusing on a person who himself is an event in the world. But unlike chronicled history, which expresses the narrator's viewpoint and can differ, the Quranic stories are the true stories.
And this truth allows them to convey historical events that have actually repeated themselves throughout time. Sheikh El-Sahrawy gives powerful examples. Pharaoh represents every ruler who wants people to worship him. The people of the cave represent every group of believers fleeing tyranny to worship God. The story of Joseph alayhi salam is the story of brothers misled by Satan causing malice. Al-Qarnayn represents every reforming ruler given means by God to implement his teachings. The tribe of Thamud and Prophet Saleh alayhi salam are people who seek a miracle, get it, but persist in disbelief. And the people of Jethro, or Shuaib alayhi salam, are those who commit fraud in trading.
It's striking how he brings it to our present time, saying even now there's more than one Pharaoh, more than one people of the cave fleeing with their religion, more than one Qarun worshipping wealth and thinking they don't need God.
And this leads to an interesting point he makes about the names in these stories. For the most part, the full names of the personalities aren't given.
Except for one story, the story of Jesus and his mother Mary, daughter of Imran, alayhim salam. Sheikh El-Sahrawy explains this is because their story, particularly Mary's conception of Jesus without a man, is a miracle that will never be repeated.
And God specified their names. Mary, daughter of Imran, and Jesus, son of Mary, so there would be no ambiguity, and no other woman could claim such a miracle. He emphasizes that Mary's story will not be repeated, hence the specific naming.
For the rest, like Moses' Pharaoh, the people of the cave, Al-Qarnayn, or the owner of the two gardens, names aren't specified because the point isn't to highlight a particular person or unique event.
He cautions against getting unnecessarily occupied trying to establish these identities, saying you will not get anywhere. The wisdom of the story is what matters, not the specific person.
And the way the stories are told in the Quran isn't repetitive. A part might be in one place, another part elsewhere, showing different aspects. Each verse adds new information. So you have to collect all the verses related to a story to get the complete picture.
He uses the story of Moses, alayhi salam, as the prime example. It's the largest, most extensive story, often reminded in the Quran, because it includes the story of the worst man or group in history. He looks at two verses about Moses' birth, Surah Al-Qasas, verse 7, and Surah Tah, verses 38 and 39.
On the surface, they might seem repetitive, but Sheikh El-Sahrawy beautifully dissects them. The first verse, Surah Al-Qasas, verse 7, shows God spiritually preparing Moses' mother, telling her to suckle him for a time, and only cast him into the river when she fears for him, assuring her he'll restore him and make him a messenger. It contains two instances of glad tidings.
Right. Then Surah Al-Tuhur verses 38 and 39, he says, changes to a quicker pace, appropriate for the actual moment of the event. Put him in a chest, throw it in the river, it will cast him ashore, and an enemy to God and Moses will take him up.
This second verse completes the picture, mentioning the chest, not in the first verse, God commanding the river to bring it safe, not in the first, and revealing that Pharaoh would take him in, and there would be mutual enmity.
Yes, he highlights Surah Al-Qasas, verse 8, which shows how this enmity became firm until Pharaoh was destroyed. If you meet enmity with goodwill, it fades. But here it became firm. So these verses aren't repetition. They complement each other, giving a complete integrated picture.
And the reason Moses' story isn't given in full in one place like Joseph's is to strengthen the Prophet ﷺ and believers, giving parts here and there to achieve that strengthening while ensuring the verses together give the full story. The story of Adam alayhi salam is likewise told in separate installments across various verses, which together make the complete story. Each individual verse also has its own wisdom necessary for the time it was revealed.
He then brings us back to the beginning of man's creation and the enmity between Satan and Adam and his progeny. He mentions the hadith, you are all the sons of Adam, and Adam was created from dust. God spoke about the first man, Adam, the material he was shaped from, the teachings he imparted, the discussion with the angels, that Adam would be his vicegerent on earth.
And that crucial detail, God taught him the names of everything so his life would have direction. He taught the logic behind knowing things and their names. Sheikh El-Sahrawy also notes that God spoke about the dialogue between Satan and his Lord when Satan refused to bow, showing Satan's argument, pride, and his plan to assail hearts with insinuations and whispers.
There are so many facets to Adam's story that a human couldn't conceive them all. God revealed them piece by piece to strengthen the believers. He confirms that the specific verse 230 we started with is unique and not repeated in chapters like Surah Al-A'raf or Surah Tah, confirming there's no repetition of this particular phrasing.
He then asks us to pause and consider, was Adam created as an individual, or with all his progeny until the day of resurrection buried within him? He points to Surah Al-A'raf, verse 11, where God addresses mankind in the plural, created them, then fashioned them, before commanding angels to prostrate to Adam.
This, he says, indicates that the primary origin of man is Adam alayhi salam, within whom were concealed the attributes of all mankind until the hour. It's as though the atoms from which all mankind would grow were within him at creation.
He makes a beautiful connection here, saying every one of us has an atom or particle from Adam. It's a connected chain of life, each generation taking the living microbe from the one before and passing it on. If a single link is missing, life ends like a man dying without descendants. The continuity of life proves this connection from Adam until now.
So, our current life is connected to Adam, uninterrupted by death, and the lives of those at the hour will also be connected to him. The angels prostrated not just to Adam, but to his descendants too, who were buried in his loins and witnessed the first creation. The phrase in Surah Al-A'raf, verse 11, created mankind and then formed them, is a new element in the story of man.
Returning to the verse, and when your Lord said to the angels, Sheikh El-Sahrawy clarifies that God wasn't seeking the angels' opinion because he says, I am going to place, indicating the decision was already made. It was an announcement.
And the reason for the announcement was that the angels had a role to play with Adam, ranging God's commands, writing accounts, acting as guardians, and other tasks connected with this new creature's life.
He addresses the idea that mankind's life is subject to natural laws, by asking, who says there isn't an angel in charge of every natural law?
He then explores the meaning of successor or vicegerent, Khalifa. Whose place will this inheritor take? One possibility is they take one another's places. Every man dies, succeeded by another. If they all lived, there would be no inheritance.
The other possibility that mankind are following from another species, Sheikh El-Sahrawy says God negated. He points to Surah Ibrahim, verses 19 and 20, where God says he can make them pass away and bring forth a new creation.
And this new creation would be of the same species. He also uses Surah Maryam, verse 59, about those who wasted prayers being succeeded by others, to show that mankind follows one another until the day of resurrection.
But he highlights that Surah Al-Maryam, verse 59, uses the word khalif, people coming after, not khalifa, vicegerent, for this kind of negative succession, citing a poem illustrating khalif as remaining among something undesirable, like mangy skin.
He then connects the prostration of angels to Adam and the subjugation of the universe for him, saying it's as though Adam was God's vicegerent on his earth, aided by God's will, not man's. He brings in the Qudsi hadith, O son of Adam, make time for my worship and I will fill your breast with riches and relieve your poverty, and if you do not, I will fill your hand with toil and not relieve your poverty. This shows the word Khalifa has several meanings.
Now the angels reply in verse 30, will you place on it one who will do ill therein and shed blood? And we celebrate your praise and extol your holiness. Sheikh El-Sahrawy asks how the angels knew this. He reasons they must have had prior knowledge or thought Adam would be a tyrant.
And how did they know about shedding blood when it hadn't happened? He concludes they must have known it from a previous life form. He points to Surah Al-Hajr, verse 27, where God says he created jinn before that from intensely hot fire. So the jinn were created before mankind, and likely caused damage and bloodshed.
God's response, surely I know what you do not know, means the angels' knowledge is limited by their created nature, while God's knowledge is timeless and unlimited.
He briefly touches on whether the angels said their question out loud or in private. He says God knew either way because he knows everything concealed and revealed, secret and even more hidden than secret.
He defines secret as what you tell in confidence, while more hidden than a secret is what you keep to yourself, known only to God.
God's statement, I know what you do not know, was to state things as they are and would be proven true later.
The angels also said, and we celebrate your praise and extol your holiness. Sheikh El-Sahrawy explains celebrate God's praise means declaring his transcendence above all that doesn't befit him, being glorified. Extol means to purify, derived from kudus, like a pail for washing.
So glorified means free of anything not befitting him, and extolled means purified. Glorifying requires a glorifier and a glorified. The angel's statement in verse 32, all glory be to you, we have no knowledge, but that which you have imparted to us, is an example of this glorification and extolling.
These acts only befit a being of absolute perfection, without blemish, which belongs to God alone. Sheikh El-Sahrawy notes that God has ruled out creatures saying, all glory be to you, to anyone but him. We never hear a human say this to another.
He connects the angel's phrase, we celebrate your praise and extol your holiness, to our invocation, glory be to God and praised is he. Glory be to God means he is absolutely transcendent in his self, attributes, and actions.
And in praised is he means we glorify you and praise you. It's an acknowledgement that the very ability to glorify God is a blessing from him. So we praise him for giving us that strength. Extol means declaring God's purity from change or defect. Because he is hallowed and pure, it's not fitting that anything impure is offered to him, or that a creature made with his pure hands does anything impure.
He makes clear the meaning of their statement. Then, out of his wisdom, God responded to the angels, not just with words, but by bringing forth an event that proved the truth of his statement, the teaching of Adam.
This brings us to verse 31. He taught Adam all the names of things. Then he showed them to the angels and said, tell me the names of these, if you truly think you can.
God responded by teaching Adam alayhi salam the names of everything. Sheikh El-Sahrawy says all things implies totality, knowledge of everything connected with these names.
A question arises, did Adam learn the names of everything until the hour, including future inventions? Sheikh El-Sahrawy answers that God singled Adam out above the angels, giving this creature made from clay a distinction over creatures made from light. Humans can't give the lower more than the higher, but God does to remind us that what we get is from his power, not ours.
He gives the example of Prophet Solomon, alayhi salam, a king and prophet given a unique kingdom, yet the weak hoopoe bird came with knowledge he didn't have. Surah Al-Naml, verse 22.
How could a weak bird know more than Solomon? Because God hates false pride and brings signs that mark the low above the high, so all know their powers are from God. Another example is Prophet Moses, alayhi salam, learning from Al-Khidr, the righteous servant.
God created all named things, even if we don't know them all, and made the angels learn their names from Adam. How did the Creator teach Adam? Not like creatures teach. He teaches by inspiration, casting the names into Adam's heart.
At that first meeting, all these things were created, and their names were imparted only to Adam, proven by the angels not knowing them while Adam did. Sheikh El-Sahrawy makes a fascinating point here. Speech comes from hearing, language from surroundings. If Adam uttered these names, he must have heard them from God.
He finds it amazing that God's way of teaching Adam is the same way humans teach children today, starting with nouns and names, this is a glass, etc., before moving to verbs. This was the first development of speech, taught by God's omnipotent power.
He addresses the question about future inventions again. Even if Adam learned the names of everything, his descendants would use existing words for new things, as new words are formed from the elements of the language, not from a vacuum.
He connects this to the origin of all things and knowledge. If things are returned to their source, they are from God. Mankind's source is God. Knowledge requires a teacher. The first teacher must have been taught by God. He is the first teacher. God taught Adam, who taught his children, and so on.
The second question is about language differences. He explains that different historical stages and human spread led groups to band together with one language. Existing languages derive from older ones, like French-Italian from Latin, or Hebrew, Syriac related to Arabic.
Even Arabic dialects, though from Quranic Arabic, differ due to historical weakness and isolation, where language became a social expression, making dialects mutually unintelligible sometimes.
So God imparted names to Adam, brought them before the angels, and challenged them, "Tell me the names if what you are saying is the truth." This honored Adam with knowledge not granted to angels, and had Adam teach the angels, it's evidence of God's omnipotence. He does as he wills. The distinction of the lowly above the lofty is only by his doing.
He uses the example of a weak person carrying a heavy load. A strong person can't give strength, only carry it for them. Only God can make the weak person strong to carry it themselves. God makes the weak strong and the strong weak.
When God says to the angels, "If what you say is true," does this mean angels lie? Sheikh El-Sahrawy clarifies angels are beings of light, who praise God and do his bidding. The meaning of true here refers to the basis of their analogy, whether that analogy was true or mere conjecture about the unseen.
Their suggestion might have been based on prior knowledge of the jinn, a previous species on Earth, drawing an analogy between them and the new species, man. God informed them their analogy was incorrect.
Or they might have been trying to foresee the future, predicting corruption and bloodshed, forgetting that no one knows the unseen except God. God was making this clear. In either case, their analogy was incorrect.
He stresses this isn't a criticism of the angels, but a correction and an indication for us that angels do not know the unseen. Their attempt was unsuccessful because God alone is completely cognizant of the unseen.
Their impetus, he explains, was their intense love of God and dislike of corruption in his creation.
This brings us to verse 32. The angels' response after Adam told them the names, they said, "May you be glorified. We have knowledge only of what you have imparted to us. You are the all-knowing and all-wise."
This noble verse confirms God is the first teacher. Every field of knowledge has a teacher, so the first must be God. Modern sciences are products of the intellectual process God gave mankind, the materials he placed in the universe, and the knowledge and logic he taught.
Inventions come from existing premises. Steam power came from observing water and sun evaporation and using heat, combined with the knowledge of wheels from observing rolling logs. All knowledge springs from prior knowledge, linked to abilities God gave mankind.
Islam's concern with science is that it alerts us to the Creator's signs, asking us to ponder and apply intelligence. Surah to Yusuf, verse 105, mentions signs in heavens and earth. People pass by and turn aside from.
God alerts us to these signs, so we use our intelligence to derive inventions. The Quran requires us to build upon the knowledge God gave Adam. Even if history shows non-believers advanced in science, believers must reflect on God's signs, like Newton observing the apple fall leading to gravity.
To glimpse God's imparted knowledge, we can look at seeds or stones. A palm stone contains an entire palm tree in potentiality. Put the seed in the ground, and it develops.
Sciences are based on theories built upon axioms or self-evident facts, things God created in the universe that require no evidence. Following knowledge back to its origin leads to God. The first teacher was taught by God, the first fruit created by God. All discoveries are present in potentiality, waiting for man's reflection and action. God was the first teacher who placed this knowledge in the universe.
He quotes Ahmad Shawqi's poem, "All glory be to you, God, the best of teachers. You taught the first generations with the pen. You sent Moses with the Torah as a guide, and the son of the Virgin with the gospel. And you unleashed the spring of teaching, Muhammad, who gave man to drink of the hadith and the revelation."
Shawqi's lines reinforce that all knowledge comes from God alone. The angel's admission in verse 32 confirms this. God is the source of all knowledge and wisdom.
He defines all-knowing as knowing everything, concealed and open, with all knowledge from him. All-wise, Hakim, is derived from bridle, controlling a wild horse. It's ascribed to God because he controls creatures. They can't move without guidance or knowledge.
Wisdom means a goal behind every action, harmony between actions. The universe is governed by the true Lord, who cannot be assailed by falsehood. The all-wise and all-knowing gives every creation structure and limits.
Wisdom means everything does what it's supposed to do, and does it well. He gives examples: jurisprudence, sound decision; poetry, proper meter; medicine, knowing disease, cure; architecture, designing for needs. Wisdom varies by purpose.
The universe is created by an all-knowing, all-wise creator, everything placed properly for its purpose. God's wisdom necessitates his being all-knowing. He gave creatures the knowledge they needed. Angels didn't know what man would do. It wasn't their affair. Mankind is distinguished by intelligence to discover God's signs needed for survival.
He brings in Surah Al-A'la, verses 1 to 3. God commands, extolling the name of the Lord who creates and makes complete balanced, makes according to measure, and guides towards goals. Everything is created according to measure. Its course facilitated towards God's guidance.
This leads us to verse 33. Then he said, Adam, tell them the names of these. When he told them their names, God said, did I not tell you that I know what is hidden in the heavens and the earth, and that I know what you reveal and what you conceal?
God responded to the angel's point about Adam's vicegerentcy, affirming that some of his wisdom was too subtle for them. Before creating Adam, God knew everything he and his progeny would do until the hour and after. Angels didn't know this. It wasn't their affair.
God showed the angels they judged Adam based on an incorrect analogy or predicting the unseen. He gave Adam distinction by teaching him names, then asked the angels, who admitted their knowledge was only from God.
Adam told the names, not by his own power or self-learned knowledge, but because God taught him. This relates to Surah to Yusuf, verse 76. God raises degrees of whomever he wills, and above everyone with knowledge, there is one who knows all. Adam's knowledge was solely due to God's will.
God's response to their concern about corruption, did I not say to you that I know the hidden things of the heavens and of the earth? This means God alone knows the absolute.
He distinguishes this from relative unseen, like a stolen wallet's thief or a decision about you, which is unknown to one person but known to others and has clues. The real unseen has no clues, takes by surprise, known only to God.
God's words, I know what you bring into the open and what you hide, make us wonder if the angels said their statement in verse 30 out loud or thought it privately. Sheikh El-Sahrawy suggests, and what you hide might indicate they said it to themselves.
But he quickly adds that God knew either way, because he encompasses all things. There's no need to debate this point. Loud or silent, it's the same for God's knowledge.
Finally, we reach verse 34. When we told the angels, bow down before Adam, they all bowed. But not Iblis, who refused and was arrogant. He was one of the disobedient.
This command to prostrate has caused much debate. How could angels prostrate to anyone but God? Does it mean worship? Is prostration to any but God permissible? Sheikh El-Sahrawy says these people haven't understood the meaning.
After God distinguished Adam with knowledge, he instructed angels to prostrate before him. This prostration was an act of obedience to God, not worship to Adam. God commanded it. Adam didn't and had no right to.
Worship, as Sheikh El-Sahrawy defines it, is obeying God's commandments and refraining from prohibitions. We obey the Creator in all He commands and prohibits. He uses the example of Hajj. We kiss the black stone and pelt the Satan stone. We kiss one and throw rocks at the other because it's God's command. Nothing is sacred but God's commandments.
The angels didn't prostrate to Adam. They prostrated at God's commandment to prostrate to Adam. This is a great difference. Prostrating at God's command isn't against his teachings. The basis is obeying God.
Did all angels prostrate? No, only those with a role to play with mankind. God explained these roles. Guardians recording actions, Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 10 to 12. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 18. Protectors from demons. Those carrying out God's decrees, Surah An-Nazi'at, verse 5.
The command didn't include angels on high, bearing the throne, guarding heavens, or others with no role connected to mankind. When Satan refused, God asked him what kept him, Surah As, verse 75. Was he too proud, or one of those on high?
This question, one of those high, meant did Satan think he was among the high angels for whom the command didn't apply? Sheikh El-Sahrawy compares the command to prostrate before Adam to God commanding us to prostrate to the Qibla in prayer. We prostrate to God's command, not the Qibla itself.
So, the angels prostrated at God's command, but Satan refused and disobeyed. Some argue Satan wasn't included because the command was for angels and he was a jinn, Surah Al-Kahf, verse 50.
Sheikh El-Sahrawy's response is key. Satan being a jinn is why he was able to disobey. Angels are compelled to obey. Jinns have free choice, like mankind in this world. God stated Satan was a jinn, so we understand how he could disobey. If God wanted to compel him, he couldn't have disobeyed. His disobedience came from free will.
God answered those who might think Satan was excluded by reminding that he did ask Satan what kept him from prostrating when he commanded him, Surah Al-Araf, verse 12.
Satan's disbelief and eternal hell were caused by rejecting the commander's command, boasting he wouldn't prostrate to one created from clay. Surah Al-Isra, verse 61. Being in the company of higher beings, angels, made it more right for him to prostrate. If the command was for the higher, it applied to the lower.
Tradition calls Satan the peacock of the angels. Having a proud position, this pride and arrogance led him to disobedience. Created with free will, he was proud of his choice to obey before delusion led to disbelief.
He refused immediately and proudly. His disobedience was the gravest sin because he rejected the commander, thought he was better than Adam, and didn't adhere to God's obedience. His delusion led him from sin to sin, and God expelled and accursed him.
When Satan saw he was expelled, he asked for reprieve until Judgment Day and swore by God's might to lead Adam's sons astray. He specified his methods in Surah Al-Araf, verse 17, coming from before, behind, right hand, and left.
Sheikh El-Sahrawy notes there are 6 directions: front, rear, left, right, above, and below. Satan only mentioned 4.
The other 2 directions, above and below, Satan cannot approach. Below is the place of prostration and submission to God. Above is where prayers and supplications rise.
So, Satan didn't just refuse prostration, he rejected the command entirely, which was the beginning of disbelief. Then he sank deeper, vowing to lead Adam and his progeny away from God's way.
It's a powerful and intricate unpacking of these fundamental verses.
Absolutely. Sheikh El-Sahrawy reveals layers of meaning that deepen our understanding of creation, knowledge, obedience, and the origin of disobedience.
Miriam, what stands out to you most from today's discussion?
For me, it's the profound difference Sheikh El-Sahrawy highlights between prostrating to something and prostrating at God's command. It reframes our understanding of worship and obedience entirely. It's about the commander, not the object. And the detail about Satan being a jinn explaining his ability to disobey due to free will is incredibly insightful. And for you, Yusuf, what stands out most?
I'm struck by two things. First, his explanation of how the Quranic stories, even when parts are told in different places, are not repetition but complementary pieces that together form a complete integrated picture, each part having wisdom for its time. Second, his emphasis that all knowledge ultimately originates from God, the first teacher, and that human discoveries are potentialities God placed in the universe, waiting for us to reflect and act.
Beautiful points, Yusuf. There's so much to reflect on.
Indeed, we hope this discussion has been spiritually enriching for our listeners. Join us next time on Sheikh El-Sahrawy's Reflections on the Holy Quran as we continue our journey through God's words. Salam alaikum.
Salam alaikum.